And again, thank you for joining us for Return of the Large Predators with our speaker, Peggy Doty. Peggy, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for being here. We had a huge registration, and I know some of those people are going to pick up the link when they get it in their email. I have my video on temporarily. I can't even see myself. I have so many things going on my screens here, but I will turn that off. But if you can see my video, when I turn it off, you'll see my black bear. I have a wood carved black bear outside of my nature center here in Northern Illinois. And by vote, not by me, he was named Forrest Stump. So he tends to look over me out the window here and stop cars as they drive by if they've not seen him. So I'm going to stop my video so I don't have to worry about how much I'm turning my head. And I want to start out by pointing when Dwayne said presenter. Note he said presenter, not expert. So this is a favorite topic of mine. Things are always evolving and changing. This is probably on the beginning of many recorded webinars I've done, but just a little bit of background. I got my bachelor's degree at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, and it was in wildlife management in the early 80s. And the difference is huge from then to today, because when we talked about managing wildlife within the boundaries, in this case of Illinois, it was focused on sustaining a population of animals that could serve human needs in the form of sustaining them with additional food sources to fill their freezer, and selling for pelts for money. I happened to study fur-bearing mammals, was my specialty at the time, and waterfowl was second. And waterfowl's main management was to feed people. We don't have quite that much need for that anymore. We don't utilize that anymore. Our hunters are still helping us maintain and manage populations when it comes to those areas, but there's not a lot of income coming in from pelting animals and such. So it's a big difference, right? So this program was started because it was these animals were wandering nomadically into our state, and it was starting to get a little exciting for people. And I knew people were going to want some information. So heads up, this is focused on Illinois, and it's not a Save the Animal program. It's a program based on just knowledge about these animals, some theories of my own and others as to why they may be traipsing around. And it's really also to help all of us understand that in any given room, when you talk about something like large predators, you are talking to up to 9 different values, wildlife values. And we'll talk about that. We need to honor everybody's value when it comes to how to manage things like this. So we'll skirt through some of these slides. This is my original. I wrote this original program quite a while back, actually, right after the mountain lion wandered into a barn in Morrison, Illinois, and there was a mom with her children at home alone, no other family members. I wouldn't say alone, they were together, but there wasn't a support team out there. And that became a very big situation that was spread far and wide. So when I started this, people were just sure that these animals were coming back. It was a covert operation, and they're not coming back. We will talk about that. They're testing the space because of different pressures potentially, but we don't have in Illinois the habitat. I noticed we have a friend on here as we were waiting to get started from South Carolina. Sir, you have plenty of black bear and you have quite large black bear, because they're eaten year round. You can get some pretty hefty bears down there in the Carolinas. So honoring these things is important, and having an open mind as we talk about these. I will leave you on this slide. You'll see my name is Peggy Doty. S is for Sue. My sister was a Buddy Holly fan. She got to name me. I don't know why. P.S. Doty at illinois.edu. If you have a piece of paper, write that down. I'd be glad to email with you if you have more questions than we can get to at the end of this, because this does stir up some excitement. This program was written for an in-person, but what I do in the beginning of a very important program like this is I like to give what's going to happen. So we're going to talk a little bit about historical species in Illinois. We're going to talk about descriptions. What makes a predator apex? Because you're going to find very quickly that coyotes don't count. Coyotes are not apex predators. In the Midwest, if a wolf would run into a coyote, most of ours are in Wisconsin, they would kill them for territorial reasons. Overview on human values, the most important part of this whole program. And then present, the current 3 predators we're talking about and some behaviors involved. I put on the bottom of that time to share your stories. Today, I'm afraid we won't have stories, time for stories, but we will answer your questions in the chat. A quick heads up as we get started, there is a bridge being installed behind me, and it's going to be a little bit of loud, consistent pounding. So hopefully I will talk loud enough for you to hear over that. So here's some of our historical species. Illinois was home to these animals: the elk, the wolf, the cougar, the bear, the porcupine. And these animals weren't just getting pressure from our European settlement. Was in the 1800s. This particular county I'm in DeKalb County, was 1837. These animals were already distributing a little more just due to succession, lack of contiguous forest. We are the prairie state, we're not the forest state. And they were already slowly moving out. But then when the pressures came with not only our indigenous friends that were living here, but then the European settlers, all of them were using wildlife management type activities, hunting for food, hunting for pelts, and that was too much pressure. And so our animals left. They extirpated. They weren't made extinct. There was some heavy hunting going on, but it didn't create an extinction situation. It simply created the need for them to evict from the space. So these apex predators, right? So predators that are not necessarily carnivores. Grizzly bears are omnivores, just like we are. We are at the top of our food chain, unless one of these animals is in our vicinity, and then technically we're not. They tend to have no predators of their own if they're apex predators. So that's why the coyote with predators like wolves don't count as an apex predator. So these guys, unless you're, I had this brought up, so I had to add it. But if I had a gun, someone said, then I'm the apex, then I'm at the top of the food chain. I said, well, yes, technically you are, as long as you're a really good shot, right? Because some of these animals are large, and they have found that when people are hunting bear, especially grizzly bear, and we're not talking about those today, that the aggravation from being shot adds to the problem. So trophic levels, what's a trophic level? Trophic level is your food chain. So at the top of your food chain, you have your apex predators. If an ecosystem is complete, you will have apex predators at the top, funguses and bacteria are at the end. And then that feeds back to the soil, which feeds our plants, and our plants support the entire food chain. So in a trophic level situation where you have apex predators, it's very complete. Where you don't, you have situations where you get an overabundance of one species or another. Hence, in our case, white-tailed deer are one of our higher numbered animals. And coyotes, though they may stumble across a fawn, they are not qualified hunters when it comes to taking down full-size deer. So they don't tend to make the impact that a wolf population would make on white-tailed deer if they were both in the same habitat. They are considered crucial at maintaining the overall health of an ecosystem. And I'm not talking about where people are for now, because I know that's a big, difficult wildlife value. But in a space like, I wrote a note in here, the reintroduction of wolves in 1995 to Yellowstone, the elk had become less abundant, and it changed their behavior patterns when they introduced the wolves. But I have to tell you, in college, my professor in mammalogy gave our senior class the duty to figure out, what did we need wolves in Yellowstone? What would the results be? What would be the impact? What would be the value? And we came up with the fact, doing some research, grizzly bears were going into hibernation underweight. They were giving birth, if they were the females, they were giving birth to underweight cubs. and emerging with some malnutrition problems. And sometimes those cubs were abandoned in order for her to save her life so she could reproduce again the next year, because the babies don't have a very high percentage rate of survival. So we figured out that if wolves were put back, you'd have a dual apex situation. You have grizzly bears and wolves, but grizzly bears like leftovers. And that's evidently what was bulking them up all those years that there were wolves. They would come along and eat the scraps, plus along with whatever food they got on their own. And without the wolves, that was part of the underweight problem. Well, we weren't wrong, but what we didn't know is just how connected the wolves' presence was to the overall, health of the ecosystem. If you search, if you'll see there on the bottom, all you would have to type in is how wolves change rivers. If you just write a note, and after this today or later, it's about a 4.5-minute video, and it explains the trophic level. And when they added the wolves, the reason they saved the rivers, the elk were so comfortable without a natural apex predator. They were grazing the sides of the riverbank so low that the erosion was destroying the actual river line, where the river should be. So with the wolves being present, the elk were starting to leave those open spaces, and it was driving them deeper in because they didn't want to be right out in the open, which allowed things to grow. The trees quintupled in just a short amount of time. So the value of the root matter, being able to hold those rivers, kept the rivers in their banks. And then beavers showed up and made pools, which created more space for other animals. The shrubs grew berries and the songbirds came back. The hawks came because there were birds to eat. The entire ecosystem that looked okay became completely intact and healthy again. So there is a critical piece to having them in an ecosystem, but we are going to start talking here in a little bit about the value when it comes to human interaction or human need and the culture that we bring to the table. But if you make sure you make note of how wolves change rivers. You'll love the commentary. It was from a TED Talk. And the gentleman who did that also has some books out of interest too, on more than just this topic. So who's in the media? These are the popular ones. Why are we doing this right now? It's March. Well, let me tell you, the wolves are not as common for the same purpose as the mountain lions, cougars, pumas, whatever you want to call them, large cat, as the black bear and the cougar. The black bear and cougar have mothers who are now pregnant, and they've been hanging out with mom. So the black bears and the cougars are mom saying, you got to get out. You got to go. You have to leave. I can't sustain you. I don't want you around when the cubs come. So the black bears are like, fine, I'm out of here. And they start wandering around. The reason we're getting them in northern Illinois is because the bear population in Wisconsin is really high. And so they don't have to wander far to land in our lap. The problem is we don't have enough forest, and they get uncomfortable because it's too wide open. With the cougars, from the research I did, the closest thing I could come to agreement was the minimum home range is around 70 square miles. So if you have a male cougar, mom kicks him out. Now, let me share with you all the cougars that have come into northern Illinois and have been DNA tested, have DNA tested to the Black Hills of the Dakotas. There are DNA tested cougars that went over the top of the Great Lakes. They got hit by cars in Connecticut and have been found over there, also from the Black Hills of the Dakotas. So they're wandering off because mom's pushing them out. So they land in this, fine, I'll go. They land, a few miles away. And a male cougar said, you can't stay here. Why? Because it's his father. Okay, it's another male. Gonna wander some more. Oh, you can't stay here. I'm your uncle. Oh, we're going to go another minimum 70 square miles. Can't stay here. I'm your male cousin from years gone by. It just starts to push, and they start getting, trying to find a place. Unlucky for them, one has landed in Chicago. Some have landed in other places. Given the opportunity, they wander back up, and we're not sure. Nobody's actually tracking the actual path they're taking. So these are all popping up. The wolves aren't so much. Currently, they might be starting to come into that northwest corner of Illinois, but a lot of times the research that David Meek shared years ago, he did a lot of the Isle Royale wolf information and studies. what happens when we do in northern Wisconsin, we have a line that changes politically with delisting the wolves, so they're open for hunting, to listing them as endangered. So it depends on the year. When there are wolf hunts and a spouse, I will use that word loosely, their mate gets killed, the other one often goes on what we call a mourning journey, a sad, mournful journey. And in years past, those journeys take them 1,300 miles, and they come down out of the north, Minnesota or Wisconsin. They come down across Illinois over to Indiana, come back out of Indiana, back Illinois, over up the Mississippi until they find a bridge to cross into Iowa, back up to either Minnesota or Wisconsin. Takes them, over 3 months. But that's when we might also see one wandering through. So let's see what we have. So we're going to go into the next slide after this is going to be that list of values. There's a lot of words on that sheet, and I'd be more than happy to send that in an email attachment if you needed it, but we'll just touch on those. So primarily our focus is on, the priority is to consider our safety. That number one, we want to be safe, right? And we have that conflicting value that we honor something like this, but we don't want to be in the same room with it. I mean, there's a food chain issue. We might have an interest and an innate want to preserve something because it's charismatic. It's beautiful. By the way, they call these guys charismatic megafauna because fauna is the animal version of flora, which is plant. The need to sustain apex predators for the health of the ecosystem falls into that. But I'm going to show you a list, and you can have more than one. And I just want you to think about what your values are. And remember, as you read them, all of these values need to be honored. So when we sit down at a table to figure out how to manage wildlife, we have to remember everybody is represented in this room. And I tend to be a wildlife manager. I recognize and I follow what the laws are. What you can and cannot do legally is what I go by. My heart is maybe different, but legalities are what we follow when it comes to wildlife management. So I'm a naturalist. I like direct experience. Do I want to go find something to pet that's that wild and big? Not necessarily, but would I, it makes me smile to think about it, of course. And, you have maybe aesthetics because it's beautiful, symbolic. We tend to have the moralistic, that spiritual reverence, the indigenous peoples who honored these animals for their strengths and their abilities and their knowledge. The doministic, mastery or physical dominance over nature. Sometimes that's built on fear, but we want to conquer it. That was kind of how, the European settlers came across, to conquer the wild, and to figure that out. It's not wrong. Negativistic, a fear or aversion, alienation from nature. You have to remember that being negativistic isn't a bad thing. It means maybe, just maybe, the effects of some wildlife situation could affect their income, could eat chickens that they're, like say it's, in this case, let's drop off the predators and go with a coyote. I appreciate coyotes for their cunning and their intelligence and their family measures. I adore how much they love their own families. However, if you raise chickens to sell to keep your family afloat, or you sell eggs, or you feed your family with those chickens, now your value is going to be different. I just want everyone to understand that every animal has every one of these values in some form, in some person. And we have to think about those when we're making rules and regulations, and we have to consider our safety always. So this isn't up here for any reason other to give you example of a negativistic, because I want you to see it and understand this is important and this person is concerned. So this came into the DNR. What farmer wants to be confronted? This came after that mountain lion went in the barn in Morrison, wants to be confronted by a lion in his barn, have his children surprised by a bear as they play in the woods nearby. There's a lot of fear here, right? Because culturally we feared these animals, and I would be afraid if I was alone with one in a forest, right? If we reintroduce these, which please let me make this very clear, we are not reintroducing these predators. That is not our job. We don't have time for that. And besides, wherever you put them, they're going to leave. So it does us no good to put them here, right? But this person was concerned that would be happening, that the reintroduction of these predators, and the first human victim will not be far behind because they're afraid, as any of us would be. There is a reason why our forebears hunted them and removed them from Illinois. While on the subject, there's too many hawks. So here's another aversion and concern. And notice it's about chickens. We don't know that this man doesn't keep his family going with having chickens for food, selling eggs. So I just wanted you to see, we have some of the values here, and maybe not so much of the aesthetic and symbolic. Okay. So we're going to start, and we're going to do the gray wolf, also known as the timber wolf, Canis lupus. Finally, a name they haven't changed. A lot of animals and things get their names changed these days, I think, because we've run out of things to name, and people want their chance, right? So I'm going to go through a list and give you a little calendar list. I've stopped. I've added slides to this over the years. I'm done because they're coming in and out often enough, and people are getting less interested, which can't be bad, actually. So notice this: the male shot during a coyote hunt in Marshall County way back in 2002. So this isn't new. This is just, we're starting to pay attention. There was a killed by vehicle. Chain of Lakes is in the Lake County, closer to the lake. Remember, this is all by Wisconsin, right? So I'm sitting about 5 counties away from the lowest known breeding population of wolves in Wisconsin. That's not that far. And it's breeding season, so those territories are being held really tight. So wolf packs don't crisscross their territories when they're in breeding season. They honor those lines, or should. Male shot in Pike County. Now that's a little ways down than Illinois. That's a little far, quite a bit farther away. This one in Joe Davies, this is the northwest corner. This gentleman got in big trouble because you're not supposed to, at this time, wolves of these 3, this was the only species that was protected, and it was considered an endangered species at that time here in Illinois, because it was here, now it's not. So this gentleman pretty much knew what he shot, and started sharing that information and gloating about it. Had it been an incident, quote, accident that he did it, it would have been different, and he would have been fined for that. I don't know how much. The male killed by a coyote hunter in Kane County, which is the next county to my east, and actually probably a little bit further south than where I'm sitting. That one was a mistake. He had no idea. He actually DNA tested it, and it definitely, it was a wolf. Now I want you to notice something, because I'm going to switch slides. Look at how we had male, 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 and female were killed in Joe Davis in 2011. They were only 4 miles apart. Now the corner of Illinois is our unglaciated area. It's full of ravines. It's perfect habitat for wolves, but it's not very big. It could hold a small wolf pack. In the entire state of Illinois, for any one of these 3 animals, we only have 14% of the state that could sustain them in the habitat of their current choice, which would be forested habitat. So if you look at the slide, now all of a sudden we have a pair. And this female, from the people who did the research, this female went in and out of Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois for quite a while, and she actually brought her boyfriend back. And they do mate for life. So she brought him back. And then if you look at this next slide, to me, this is exciting. It's interesting. It's because they're not going to be able to maintain much. We just don't have the space. But look at this now: female, 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 female. And now I've quit putting slides in here, but the girls are coming. The girls are trying to figure out how to, manage the space, and they're not finding anything doable except maybe that northwest corner. And it would take a lot of open exposure to get down to the southern Illinois, where the majority of the rest of that kind of habitat is. So the female that was tracked by radio collar in Stevenson County, the signal was a mortality signal on her collar. So it means it beeped endlessly and did not move. So the signal was lost, and then the wolf was finally, battery ran out probably, and the wolf was found dead. They don't know what, because whenever an animal is shot, the animals that eat other things, the scavengers, they cleaned up a lot of that. So it was hard to say if she was shot or hit by a car and wandered to a spot to die. The female wolf killed by vehicle in LaSalle County, that's south of me. These two were interesting. These two, Grundy and Dwight is in Livingston. So these two are headed, if you go through those counties, you're heading for the Illinois River Valley. And the interesting thing is these were both in 2015. The first one was female and was DNA tested to the Western Great Lakes wolves. So up in that zone in Wisconsin. And the next one, killed just a few months later, was just a county south. But this one was not considered a true wolf because when they DNA tested her, she had domestic canine genes, not in the immediate parent. Okay, so back in her DNA, she had domestic dog. And I don't know if any of you guys on the call remember, there was a thing going on in the early 1990s where it was popular, gosh forbid, to have a wolf dog mix hybrid puppy pet. What happened is a lot of those animals had a lot more wolf than dog, and the need to not be indoors, not be cared for. They were slightly aggressive. And some people just turned them loose and they became part of the, part of the wild as far as breeding. So though it's not common anymore, it is still showing up, and they do not consider that second female a wolf because of the DNA mix from that time frame. They're not breeding with dogs on purpose. These are so far back. It's during that time when people were purposely breeding them and selling them in the pet trade. So this picture, I wanted to show you, and it's hard. I'm gonna have to look at both my screens. This is Monroe. Let me get my thing. Right here is Monroe. So the farthest wolf pack, last I checked, that held territory during breeding was here. So if you come down 1, 2, 3, 4, and now 5 and 6 are the counties north of me. So they're not far. And if the pressures are such, and the populations are high enough, as we protected them up here in this northern portion, you could be getting some that just come down into that northwest corner. You're rarely going to know it. They're the only wolf attack that I could find that was research supported, was in Saskatchewan, and no one saw it. There was a man who was found dead. The bite marks and tracks were wolf, done by wolves, but they don't know if the man died from the wolves or if they were there shortly after and utilized that as part of what they wanted to eat. We don't know, but it is considered a wolf attack. But it is, other than that, it's almost impossible to find anything. I did find one resource that had later than 1837. Let's see, I think it was when all the wolves were considered gone in Illinois. And I think, did I have that back here? Maybe that's coming up. There was a report in one of the documents at the courthouse, that had a man that came in with a coat to the courthouse demanding that somebody replace his coat because there'd been a wolf sleeping in his barn. And when he went in, the wolf jumped up and grabbed his arm and ripped his coat. And he wanted some kind of money back for his coat. And that was when they were considered gone, but clearly trying to still, linger for the habitat purposes. Here's that line. So up here, the dark blue is the line that they are consistently delisted and relisted as an endangered species. Threatened is the light blue. The wolves are considered threatened. Below I-80, they're not protected, not their original home range. So my peers and I that talk a lot about wildlife, if you're going to harm a wolf on I-80, you better make sure he's on the south side because you won't get fined, right? Not a funny joke, I guess, but it's funny that it's one line. And I-80 seems to be this magical Bermuda Triangle in Illinois for wildlife and animals. I actually had an uncle once that said, he was from southern Indiana. He says, there ain't nothing good happens north of I-80. I don't know to this day what he meant. But I find that interesting that I-80 holds so much weight. All right, so here's Illinois. So here's Grundy. I don't know, hopefully you can see my pointer. So I'm sitting right here in northern DeKalb County. Wisconsin is right above Boone here. And those wolves, the Grundy one that was found, these two they were both hit by car, full wolf considered by DNA. The one in Livingston is the one that had canine. But what you're seeing here is there it goes. So the Illinois River Valley, right, is cruising right through here. And it really does sustain them long enough because you've got the riparian area, you've got forest, you've got water, you've got other animals that are there because so you can eat. And it really tends to be the track for our mountain lions and our wolves until they get down here by Pike. Remember we had one in Pike, because down here, and that one in Pike was traveling the river valley most likely, and then they hit that area, Pike, Calhoun, and they hit the Mississippi, and they work their way back up because again, it's a safe corridor with all that large riverway and protection, habitat protection. Let's see, and I was going to show you Kane County is right to the east of where I am. That's where the one gentleman thought he had a coyote, but he had a wolf. So let's switch to the big one. So, when we talk with Extension, we are objective. We give you research-based information. We try to help solve some problems, or at least make heads or tails of it. But I'm going to tell you right now, if I'm going to be alone in the woods with any one of these three, this is not the one. This is the one that gives me the most concern if I were alone with it, because they're a cat. I have the sweetest indoor cat in the world, and she never does anything. But one time she hid in the hallway and jumped and grabbed my leg out for no reason other than I was moving. So, if you think about it, if you have cats at your house, I know there's got to be people nodding, going, oh yeah, every once in a while they just, for some reason, get a little bit more aggressive in a household kind of way, right? So the mountain lion, they've changed the name a few times. It was Felis concolor, now it's Puma concolor. And this, people think cats don't like water. Well, cougars don't mind it. So this one's traipsing through, and they're large. But here we have in Illinois, when you see a cougar, 99% of the time, you're not seeing an adult animal. You're seeing a 2-year-old juvenile animal strapped with good muscle, not weighted, not super heavy, maybe 125 pounds, which sounds big if you're comparing it to your small dog or cat. But these are not adult animals. They're trying to figure out where to get territories, where they can go, pushed in, pushed out. And it's interesting. They're quiet. They don't like to be seen. If you see one, keep your eyes on it. Cougars are such that if you can see them, they're contemplating you, but they're not making big decisions about you. If they sneak off into the grass, that's not a healthy situation, and you'd want to keep yourself aware of where that animal is going and being, because all the research I found made it very clear that cougars will not attack you facing you. They will only attack from behind. That's at least their MO. Out west, when I was doing research for this, they actually have documents where joggers that insist on jogging in cougar country put masks, like people masks on, like Halloween face masks on the back of their head. So there's a face in the front and a face in the back. My personal feeling, I don't think I need to jog that bad, you guys. But there are people that think that that's a good idea in order to protect themselves. So these animals are trying to figure out what to do. They end up hitting the Illinois River Valley, drop down to the Mississippi, and back up again. They don't have a certain path. They don't have a set highway getting down there. And some of them get past the Illinois waterway a little bit and then maybe go up and down. We had one cougar, and it'll come up here in the list, that was found in Randolph County, which is Southern Illinois. They DNA tested that one to Texas. So it came up, it didn't come down from the Dakotas. Just threw this in here for track comparison. The cats, okay, so that picture on the right would be any cat, even your domestic cat. If it fits on a quarter or a slightly bigger, it's a domestic cat. If it fits in the palm of your hand, you're dealing with a very large animal. Notice there's no claws. They're always retracted. All of our wildlife, any animal has what I like to refer to as a toolbox. They have found that one broken claw on a cougar can reduce its ability to succeed, in other words, live, by up to, I think it was 40 or 60%. They need to keep those things safe because they use them for the purpose of hunting. Notice the lobes on the pad So that's a that's a hind foot, and the front of the pad has 2 lobes on it. I'll get my pointer over here. 2 lobes on the top, 3 on the bottom. That's the hind foot. It often tends to drop right where the front foot was. Not so much in the cougars as the wolves. Cougars are a little, I call them foot flappy. You know, if you watch them, their foot comes up and flops back down. But that, if you're going to see the track, you're looking for these 2 lobes, 3 lobes, and no toenails. A large print the size of your hand that has toenails and 1 lobe and 2 lobes. This is the hind track of a canine. Could be a coyote, could be a wolf, could be a dog. That's another thing to tell you. You can take pictures all day long of an animal that you think is a wolf, but nobody will call it a wolf for you because of that DNA issue with domestic canines. You have to have a DNA test to define that it definitely is a wolf. But all canines have the claws. They actually have 5 toes, but it's the dew claw that doesn't make an impression in the track, right? And then this triangular lobe is what you're looking for. So right away, the nails should give it away. I've had one incident, my own personal tracking incident, where I found canine tracks with no claws. Guaranteed a canine, guaranteed this thing was large because it was running. There were no human tracks with it. And the lope on this thing was 10 to 12 feet from beginning of stride to end of stride, right out here in the open. One of my many theories, one, if it was a wolf on a morning journey, you know, their nails are going to wear way down because they're moving across all kinds of things. The other possibility is a show dog, because a lot of our borzois, Scottish wolfhounds, are plenty big to leave a huge track. And a lot of times those toenail trims for show dogs are almost totally take the nail down. You know, it's a real short nail. So those are the potential, but I have a lot of photos of that foot, and it is one huge footprint and one large span. But I knew it wasn't going to bother me, and it was probably long gone, so I didn't worry about it too much. Here's that one I was talking about for the mountain lion. Last seen in 1862. That doesn't mean they weren't here. It's just last recorded. Male killed by a train in Randolph County. So that's way south, and they DNA tested it, and it was from Texas. And then you're looking at 2004 in Mercer. This is one we're going to talk a little bit more about. Male shot and killed in Roscoe Village in Chicago in 2008. That poor thing wandered into the wrong place. Hard to get out of something like that. You come in at night when it's a little bit quieter, and then things get, busy. Male shot hiding in the corn crib. This is the one that got me started really looking into this. We have to think about how incredibly strong these animals are and what they're doing. And then Dwayne, who's your MC today, your host, he actually sent me some pictures. The second one in this list from Morgan County. We're going to look at that. When he sent that, I'm like, ooh, can I use that? There were some great pictures. Pike and Calhoun. You guys, that's down where the Illinois meets the Mississippi and heads back up. Once again, the majority of the sightings are somewhere within the vicinity of those waterways. So going back to the Roscoe Village one, I didn't have permissions for the photo from the Chicago Tribune, so I couldn't include it on here, but it has a picture, and you might be able to find it if you put in Chicago Tribune, Cougar, Roscoe Village, something like that. It's from the hips down of a officer. His gun belt is unsnapped. His hand is ready to grab that Glock, and he's been told to find the cougar. It's a fuzzy picture, but behind him, the cougar is walking right behind him, tail down, ears forward, no interest at all in any human being, just wants to find their way out of town. And both of them are terrified. Both are completely afraid. And I'm so glad they didn't have, if that officer would have turned around, I don't know who would have been more afraid. So the cougar walked through people. And of course, when they said there's a cougar in Roscoe Village, everybody came outside. And in Illinois at this time, we weren't prepared for these things. We had no tranquilizers. When you look at those wildlife values, yeah, I love these animals too, but to have an animal of this caliber with a full toolbox walking around in the city, and then somebody said, well, but if we could have tranquilized it, yes, if we had tranquilizers, which we didn't, and if we would have tranquilized it, what are you going to do with it? because that's just putting them to sleep for a little while and not have, it wasn't our fault. I say our, because I'm not part of the state management, but there was no plan, nothing like that. So these animals, you have to put them somewhere. If you're going to capture them, where are you going to re-release them? How far can you go? What's that mean? So there's a lot of questions, right? And we have to consider all of them. And does an animal, a lot of people want to put them into captive situations. All plants and animals have one job, and that's to eat enough to sustain themselves and then to eat more to reproduce and to continue that process. If you put them in a confined situation, you're asking them to give up every single thing they're built to do. And I'm just saying, I don't know if that's fair. So we have to really think about all these pieces, right? And this is just for us to contemplate. This isn't an answer, right? This is just to contemplate what to do. Here we go. You cannot deny. The IDNR would not deny you. If you took a picture of a wolf, they'd say, we're just not sure. You take this picture, they're like, yep, you got a cougar. They're not going to deny you. You can see the dark tip tail, this long tail. I do get a lot of pictures of large domestic house cats that people ask me if they're cougars, and they always have a long tail. So I tell them it's not. I can see why, because it was big, but on a bobcat, you've got a teeny tiny tail. So you have to have that. And on a cougar, you have to have this long, intensely long, almost the length of its body. It's part of their toolbox. It's their balance. They use it wisely, and it's a giveaway. Let's see what this next one is. Oh, there we go. Look at this one in 2016. He's trim. He's a lean machine. He's not carrying a lot of weight. He has real thick legs and a little bit of a slender body. He's a junior. I would call him a delinquent. And there was some study out of Washington State, out of the university up there, that found that one of their thoughts was, when we do cougar management, so in places where you can hunt cougar, there's no guidelines. So people are going for the biggest ones they can find. And part of their thought was maybe they're taking away all the trainers that train them that people are not our food. We like to stay hidden. We eat this or that, but we don't eat that. So part of it was wondering if these youngsters have no mentoring. And as humanistic, as anthropomorphic as that sounds, there might be something to that, a little more guidance, because they don't leave till they're 2 years old, right? So if they're being raised without adult supervision, they may not know all the cougar rules. This is a little hard to see, but the original range, I'm going to point at it. It's this pale clay color, not the dark. The dark's the current range, and the Black Hills are here where that dark and cream color mix. But their original range went right across the top of the U.S., right here, a little bit into Canada in the Northeast, and all of the below. That was their original range. I do not care for people who sell this predator things going on as a threat, like they're coming back to claim their habitat. No, they're not. They don't think like that. They are trying to find a place to live because their numbers are higher in their current environment. The pressures are changing. Maybe their prey quantity is changing, but the original habitat was the entire US and a little bit of Canada. And now it's this dark space over here. Most of that due to habitat and pressure. And they're putting in another large piece of the bridge. Can you tell? Sorry about that. So here's a cool map I found. Check this out. So here's the hills. Some of these animals are coming up from Texas. This one down in Randolph County, way down here. That one was one of our Texas push up. The rest of ours, that they're not all dotted on this map. It only goes to 2013, but they were all coming over and down out of the Black Hills. Pretty much all of ours were, so far, the ones we've DNA tested. Doesn't mean one of these guys might be slipping in and up on us up the Mississippi, but all those that have been DNA tested, including the ones over here in the Northeast, are all from the Black Hills. So they're dispersing, but they gotta find a place that can sustain them. And so far, they're not finding it with us in Illinois. I don't think this is going to work, the technology, but I'm going to make an attempt. And the reason I put this in here was to I've given you a lot of, this just has to happen right now until we're prepared. You know, destroying an animal over tranquilizing is a lot to stomach for some of us, depending on our value. But the Cougar Fund, and I am not promoting either or, I'm promoting management and care for all. But this video, if it doesn't work, it was basically by the Cougar Fund to help people understand the chances of being harmed by a cougar, you know, because of the concerns up where they are found more. And I thought, quite frankly, I thought they did a good job in the sense of how they personally got their message across. They're just making people aware of the research by number. If it doesn't work, you can probably find it. We'll see. It might be hard to hear with your personal volume on your computer. Some people may be able to hear it. It's short. But let's see. I don't know if we can get it to work or not.
You will raise your right hand and repeat after me, that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States. The office of President of the United States.
Neil, this is Houston, loud and clear. I'm going to step off the limb now. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
So I'm reminding you, I'm not promoting preservation. All right, preservation is where we preserve everything intact as is, but I wanted to show you how they explained it, but with research. And I think that's one of those values. Not everybody wants a thing to do with those animals on their property or near them, but we have to honor all the different values. The cougar, like I said, you know, I will tell you that I personally care. I personally carry a clip-on pocket knife now. I work out at a nature center. I'm always trying to open something to show somebody, you know, a plant or something. But I asked for one for Christmas one year because all the research I did where people survived cougar attacks, especially these delinquents who aren't totally skilled at this yet, when they're attacking because we're moving, joggers, runners, that action, you know, tends to draw them. But a lot of the people defended themselves by digging around in their pocket, opening their pocket knife and throwing their hand backwards at them and hitting them. Remember, they're attacking from behind. And that stabbing of the knife was enough to get them to go away. So, my own personal choice was to get a clip-on, really nice pocket knife. And I think that's overkill, but I think, you know what? You never know, right? So, but these guys, these cougars are, you know, out in California when they were building more and more into cougar country, and then they'd put their walking and jogging trails around the outside of the subdivisions. They're just putting that right up to the edge and within the edge. And then they were having, people were getting jumped by cougars because not necessarily as food, just because they were moving, you know, running. And so we have to consider their personalities and how they react, and maybe not do those things and kind of ask for trouble in a way. So I switched this black bear picture. This is our last one, our last animal species. I switched this because we had Bruno the bear. Why they named him, I'm not sure, but he sure had a group of people following. He was not the bear I'm talking about. He was a black bear. But the bears that we see coming into Illinois are just that. They're coming into Illinois. They've been nowhere else. They've, you know, their mom's saying, get out. They're wandering. The thing we have to know about black bear is the males will go up to 100 miles away from their mom, right there. I'm out of here. I am gone, gone, gone. And then they get where they're going, maybe the cornfields of Northern Illinois, and they look around and realize there's no girl bears. remember what we said, the whole purpose of being a wildlife or a plant, you know, a wild animal or a wild plant is to reproduce yourself. So they wander back to try to figure out what to do. And in this case, that Bruno was a full scale, heavyweight adult bear, not a 2-year-old bear, not a little bear. Most of the bears we're seeing are probably 100, maybe 120 pounds if they're lucky. They're the size of a black lab, which I get a lot of calls about bears that turn out to be somebody's black lab in a field. That happens every year. And so they're not huge. I mean, they really are. They are bigger than a black lab, but notably, they're not massive like Bruno was. And they stroll, you know, they're never in a whole bunch of hurry, right? So since 1870, black bears have been gone. We've had some situations. Now, remember what I just said about the females not going far and the males not sticking around. So in 2009, we had this black bear that was found, quote unquote, hibernating in a culvert. And somebody spotted it, so they captured it. This is a bear that's nowhere near any bear population. And when they captured it, they were taking it to a place in Wisconsin that kept animals, you know, in a preserve, fenced in area, compound type place. And somebody opened a pop and the bear begged for it. The bear was quite aware of snacks and pop and wanted it. So they were pretty sure it must have been somebody's pet that got loose. And that same year, just a few months later, somebody spotted a female black bear with a cub very close to where that other black bear was found. And then they lost track of her. They couldn't find her. Remember, females don't go more on average than 10 miles from their mom. And this is nowhere near a bear population. So my personal theory is dad fell asleep in the culvert when he got out. He got captured. And this person also had a female. And those two had bred. That's just a personal opinion, but that's the only thing that makes sense due to their behavior for me. So that mom and cub were spotted within the next year. I just looked at my numbers there. So, and then train engineers spot them a lot. Our train engineers, our farmers, and our hunters are the best resource we have for coming across these animals. So kudos to all of you in those professions for helping us keep track of what's going on when we're not looking. Look at the original home range of the black bear, everything in green. So originally that's where they were, and they slowly figured out they liked less prairie, more trees, and they worked their way into different parts of the US. And now the black bear population for Wisconsin, I'm going to go back to that slide in just a second. This is the Wisconsin. I can't find an up-to-date map than this one, but this rare light green spot, okay, I'm sitting right in the middle below here, right? So occasional. So yeah, they're wandering into the northwest corner, and they're wandering around in my county, and then they wander back up. We had one quite some time ago, and I don't think it was on that first set, and it was 2014. And the sheriff and I had a conversation. I said, just make sure this bear gets out in one piece, because back then you could shoot that bear. Now the bears, the wolves, and the cougars in Illinois, you may not shoot them. You may not kill them in any way unless your safety is involved, which of course anybody could use that. So this black bear in 2014 was cruising through, and the sheriff and I were talking. I said, just get it out of here alive, because the next one will be less exciting. And that's what's happening. We're getting used to this. I have people in counties west of me that shared with me, they don't tell anybody when they see them because they just want to leave them alone. So this is happening. It's becoming a little more common, the in and the out. Again, 14% is not enough land mass to sustain them, or at least not a high number of them. So when I was getting ready to hang up, I said, just, get it out of here alive and let's move on. And if you need me, let me know. And as I was hanging up, he goes, wait, Peggy. I said, yeah, Roger. He said, I called Wisconsin. I said, yeah. He goes, they don't want it back. I said, well, think big raccoon, because they are troublemakers up there. There's plenty of them, and they get into hummingbird feeders and bird feeders and garbage cans. And really people up there have learned just how to coexist with them. You keep your garbage in your garage. You don't keep stuff out. But it is like having oversized raccoons, I'm afraid. I don't know if I have it coming up, so I'm going to go back to this. It's not the best slide. We'll wait. But south of St. Louis, Missouri, all those counties Bears in the 50s were put back in those counties because they were gone, and they have sustained, and they are doing well, but they haven't figured out how to cross the river into Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois would be part of that 14% that could sustain some black bears. And for some reason, they've yet to figure it out fully, probably because the girls aren't going far enough. But at some point that could happen, I think. Something to look at. These are bear tracks. Notice the size, 5 inches by 5, 7 by 5. The funny thing is, if you see these, of course, you'd want to go in the house. But if they're by your home, just let it pass. But if you see them and there's the size of a quarter, you should also go in the house, because it is amazing how close a skunk's footprints are to a bear footprint. The size is the difference, clearly, right? And they don't necessarily walk upright. We had a bear in Rockford, Illinois, a few years ago, and the expert, whoever it was that went out, said the bear walked on its hind feet to the road. And bears pace, so their right side goes forward, then their left side, unlike us diagonal walkers. So their right foot, front foot, and their right hind foot go at the same time. And oftentimes they'll direct register, which means their back foot lands where their front foot was. So this person was seeing a bear that was walking and stepping on its own front footprints, but they said, and that's how they left it. It walked to the road on its hind feet and then left it hanging like that. Like, was it thumbing a ride? I don't know, but it was just curious to me that that's how they left the story. So another comparison, because remember, my biggest point of this program is to remember our wildlife values. This was taken from the Tribune, and this person, I believe animals have a right to live. There's one value. I just think there's something that needs to be done so that they don't kill an animal. Now, we don't have just herbivores in our food chain. Our trophic levels require predators. And I get her feeling and her emotion, but that would be impossible for us to do, right? We can't necessarily have any ecosystem. Our own existence depends on the food chain. I threw these in here just to see that things haven't changed a whole lot, not meaning bad or good, but Aldo Leopold, who wrote Sand County Almanac, he was one of the first people he was the first guy that really created game management, and that we can hunt, but we have to have legalities and we have to manage accordingly so we don't wipe something off the map. And in this case, remember, we didn't wipe any of these animals out of Illinois. They left. The habitat was not sustaining them even before the European settler put more pressure on them. But Leopold, where he stated the hope of the future lies not in curbing the influence of human occupancy. It is already too late for that. He thought there was too big of a human population in 1933. I'd hate for him to visit us now. But in creating a better understanding, which is what we're doing with each other today, of the extent of that influence and a new ethic for its governance, it takes all of us. So what I like to talk about is social capacity. So when we talk in wildlife about carrying capacity, it's how many animals can fit on a certain piece of habitat and exist before it goes down. If you get too many animals, they get diseases, they get sick and die, and then you start with a lower number only to build back up. So what do we need to do socially? So carrying capacity is fine, but without social capacity, what are we, with all of our 9 values, willing or interested in doing in this case? Because in the end, social capacity wins, right? We as humans get what we want, and that's just how it works. But if we could honor all the values and come up with something that worked for everyone, then none of us would be feeling left out of the answer. And then you come up to 2014, and remember, this is when I started doing this program, and Mark Miller was our director back then. Really nice person. And it's interesting, I won't read to you the top part, but then he says, now we must focus. This is when we started having all these encounters, getting a little heavier with these large predators. Now we must focus on the next step of creating a better understanding and a new ethics to support the future management and protection of large carnivores in Illinois. He doesn't mean conservation, preservation. He means management. How do we deal? We don't have a fence, you guys. We can't raise the gates. Animals don't see the Illinois line. They don't cross into DeKalb County and go, oh, I'm in DeKalb County where I'm at, right? Their whole goal is to survive. They don't have a covert operation to make us crazy. They don't know we care. And so it's just a matter of keeping all this in mind. So quick review as we get close here to the end. Hopefully you're still on there with me and you're hanging in there. Just remember, birds are the property of the federal government. The state of Illinois, the state of South Carolina, Indiana. I saw someone from Indiana at the beginning. Your state does not own your birds in the sense of management. It first falls on the federal government. And then any other wildlife within the state is the responsibility of the Natural Resource Department. Unless you have an endangered species, which then the federal endangered species list would land higher, than ours. So here's some things. We have a new website for lots of answers for your everyday answers for wildlife at home, and also who to contact. wildlifeillinois.org. It's a great website. And it has all like the things to consider for everything from woodpeckers to if you see something and you want to report it like this, right? So, and then of course we have the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, all of which are good sources. So when you're reporting something, photos work except for wolves. You can still take a picture, but it won't get you an answer as to whether it's a wolf or not. Track or cast, also not for wolves, but cougars and bears. It'll tell you it's a canine, but it can't tell you if it's a wolf. And then carcass location. Carcass are important. If you find one of these large predators and it's dead, a DNA test, we want to add that to our research. We want to know where they're coming so we can look to see what's continuing to force them our direction. And then you would get, if you went into the IDNR, you'd want to look for it used to be under wildlife disease and invasive wildlife program. So you can search around, do a search in there, or reach out to me and we can help find that for you. Now, this is my thank you slide before I show you our next program next month, but I wanted to share this with you. So we have a little least weasel here. Least weasels are like 6 inches tall, but for some reason, nobody's afraid of them. I'm terrified of them. They are literally the number one mammal killer in Illinois. So these guys have a 37-acre home range. Again, they're only like 6 inches tall. They almost never sleep. They're almost dead. They're almost all dead before their first birthday. They eat and breed and die. That's what they do. They take chipmunks. They take anything they can pull down, and jaw strength to body size. The research says they have the strongest jaw strength to body size, second only to the Tasmanian devil, which means jaw strength to body size, theirs is better than an African lion. I just wanted to throw it in there to lighten the load of all the stuff we shared, but it is kind of interesting that this tiny little beast, and if you have these, you have rodents, leave them be, let them eat them up and they'll move on. They don't stick around long. All right. And then just as a reminder, and I don't have a link, but if you go into Everyday Environment webinar series, you will see that next month, Michelle, one of our good friends and peers, is doing Illinois archaeology. I'm already signed up, and she'll be sharing that on the Thursday, April 14th at 1 p.m. And at this point, Dwayne, I have talked their ear off. I have not watched the time. Hopefully I'm not too, we started just